will never find a candidate who doesn't have any kind of black mark against them.
Although we sisters are supposed to be invisible, God has nevertheless given us eyes and ears.
You should be careful, Thomas.
Let's start at the beginning, both Ed and Tessa. What's the origin story of you two linking up, getting the rights to this book?
A long time ago, I read the first few chapters of this novel in manuscript form. Luckily enough, I was able to get the rest of it so that I could meet Robert Harris. But we were really early in the process, so I had to convince him to let us, quite a new company at the time, option the material. And I had such a sort of sense of clarity that this could make a film, but obviously didn't quite know how it might be good, because you can always think a story is good, but finding the right people to deliver it is quite a thing. But it was so clear and also so soulful as a story that I knew that Peter Strawn was the right writer if I could convince him. And once I'd had a draft, I started to look for a director, and I'd met Edward because I absolutely loved Patrick Melrose. Again, many of you might have seen that amazing series. I just thought it was phenomenal television, and I met Edward in Cannes, and we started talking, and as Edward says, I sent him lots of projects which he said no to. He thought I had terrible taste, until I sent him this, and that's really when this journey started properly.
So how did it strike you, Ed, when it came your way?
Well, when I first met Tessa in Cannes, I knew, this was like a match made to happen, and it turned out she is. I've never met anyone who's as good with notes through the entire process, especially also in editing. My first conversation with her, what is it this time, basically? What are you sending me this time? And she said, I think it might be, I've got a first draft, an early draft of a script, and I think you might like it. I said, who wrote it? She said, Peter Strawn. And I said, I want to read it immediately because I love his work. He's the best writer in the world, I think. And there was one line, Peter always says this, I'm going to steal this now from him. There was one line in the script, in the stage direction, and it said, out of the crooked timber of humanity, no straight thing was ever made. And that's the soul of the script, and it's the soul of the humans on the screen, and that really drew me in. And on top of it, it was a wonderful chess game of political maneuvers where we thought, Pakula is a big inspiration, and I thought maybe we can make a Pakula movie with that crooked timber inside.
Nick, I'd love to bring you in a little bit in terms of the way that this film is told through character, and particularly a thriller told through character. So when you're in a chamber drama, how are you making choices with Ed about how to tell that story, how to keep the pace alive, and how to open the film up, maybe?
Well, it's definitely, the way that Edward wanted to shoot this film was one of the reasons why I was so keen to do it. Was he wanted to be very rigorous in its approach and in terms of the architecture and how the shots were put together, and that's a great challenge for an editor, is to as you say, how do you keep the pace alive and deliver a story that's being told but still maintaining a certain very rigid form. One of the great things about working with Edward is he's so interested in the detail at the beginning, and often when you cut a film you start being quite rough with the rough cutting, but we spent a lot of time in the detail and fine cutting, which is, for me, I found really liberating, because I was able to sort of set aside the bigger picture of the film and those concerns with pace, and it sort of allows you, when you come back to watch the film, you're fresh to it, and it's new, and then it shines a light on things that need to be addressed, and whether it's slow or needs to be sped up and so forth.
How did you want to progress the feel of the film as you are going back to familiar motifs and images and even shots in some ways?
I storyboarded them because I was incredibly scared that they would be repetitive, and that they would be just boring. And if you wing it, if you go there, okay, let's shoot it, and we're going to shoot a close-up of each one and a wide shot and so forth, then they will become repetitive. So you have to have some kind of idea of how that could progress, or how each time it feels different. The pacing is very deliberate. I'm very keen on putting the camera somewhere to make a point and only moving it to the next shot when the story progresses, when you want to make the next point. And Nick and I are very keen about using each shot just once per scene, for a single purpose. And the purpose is to make that point, and that ideally in a scene you don't make the same point twice, so why use the shot same twice? We worked a lot on eliminating edits, actually. Like in the beginning, we probably had a lot more edits, and slowly we peeled back and concentrated more and said, like, okay, let's give Ray 45 seconds here or a minute on that one shot, and then 10 seconds on this and that, and the scene is done.
So any fan of an Edward Berger movie has come to expect a pretty incredible score, Volker, and you've lived up to it again with Conclave. It's really thrillingly disruptive in this movie. I wonder if you could talk about the genesis of this music.
Yeah, well, first of all, when I heard about the topic, I was thinking about finding a replacement for religious music, because obviously it's the first thing is maybe you want to have a choir or an organ in there, because the Vatican, as well as other big churches and cathedrals, they somehow represent a kind of idealistic religious world, and I wanted to find an instrument that somehow represents that. And I found an instrument that was built in 1952 in a place near Paris from two brothers called the crystal bachet, which is an instrument that is built out of glass rods, and it's 4 octaves. It has 4 octaves in tune, and you play it with water. So you actually put your hands in a water piece, and then because your hands are wet, you rub the glass rods, and they start to ring like a wine glass. There was this kind of leitmotif that is now in the film also always coming when Ralph is like thinking about the idealistic idea of religion and his role in the whole situation. We have sometimes this shadow of that theme coming into his head, and I think that helps so much to always keep that idealistic approach quite high.
How does one go about building a Sistine Chapel?
Well, actually, what Edward did was do a number of things. He found lots of locations to make up the world that we're in. And the big concern for Edward was about not making a static film, to make something that had the scale and the beauty, as well as those moments of intimacy. So a combination of a patchwork of amazing locations around Rome and just outside Naples, where that amazing staircase is from a castle called Caserta. And then an old repurposed set of the Sistine, where those amazing painters who were listed at the end of the film came back and repainted amazingly beautifully a Sistine ceiling that is actually a CGI ceiling. And then, amazingly, by the side of that Sistine set, our designer, Susie Davis, built a room that was then all of their rooms remade, a number of bedrooms remade, and an amazing corridor.
Lovely. Thank you all so much. Thank you all for coming out tonight.
Thank you very much.